Now back to our breaking news. A former soldier who claims that his hands were wet and that his gun slipped when he shot and killed a man in 1988 has been found guilty of manslaughter. David Holden shot Aidan McAnespie at a County Tyrone border checkpoint in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. Well, let's bring in our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins, who's in Belfast for us. This ruling's been a long time coming. David, tell us more.
Yes, David Holden was an 18-year-old member of the Grenadier Guards on duty at Auchnacloy in County Tyrone when 23-year-old Aidan McAnespie was fatally shot in the back after passing through a security checkpoint in 1998. Mr Holden, who's now 52, admitted that the shots had been discharged from a machine gun in his hands, but he said it had been fired by accident, that his hands were wet and that his finger had only been on the trigger for a number of seconds. The court during this trial heard that he had previously identified Mr McAnespie as a person of interest to the security forces, and therefore the prosecution made the point that of all the places where those shots could have ricocheted, it was quite unbelievable that they could by accident have struck the very person who was under surveillance by Mr Holden at the time. Some really damning words from the judge in the last half hour. Mr Justice O'Hara said the evidence that Mr Holden gave during his trial was entirely unconvincing, that it was incoherent, that he did not believe him, that he had created a false account of what happened, and he said he was beyond any reasonable doubt criminally culpable and found him guilty of manslaughter. He is the first former British soldier to have been convicted of a historical offence in Northern Ireland since the 1998 Good Friday Agreement. 6 veterans to date have been charged. 2 of those cases collapsed, another 2 were halted, and in the case of one soldier, he died while on trial. So this really is a significant finding. And of course it comes at the time when there is much debate about the government's attempt to bring forward legislation to effectively end the prosecution of soldiers for historical offences in Northern Ireland. Victims on all sides have fiercely opposed that legislation because of course it doesn't just grant a de facto amnesty to former soldiers but to former terrorists, and the government just yesterday said it would bring forward amendments to address some of those concerns, but they're still not acceptable to victims. So this former soldier has been found guilty of manslaughter back in 1988, and he will come before the court again in a few weeks' time for sentencing.